EV price war looming? And if so, what does that even mean for consumers and auto manufacturers? Last month, Tesla slashed prices across all of their models, with the Model 3 getting a modest but still impactful $3,000 price cut, and the Model Y getting a whopping $13,000 price cut. But it is important to note that as I'm recording this video, Tesla has announced that they're going to be increasing the price of the Model Y by either $1,000 to $2,000 depending on the trim level, which means that the overall price deductions that the Model Y has seen is not actually $13,000, but is instead anywhere between $11,000 and $12,000. Still substantial either way, but it does make a difference. In addition to Tesla, Ford just last week announced that they would be cutting the price of the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which is a car that competes directly with the Model Y. Mach-E prices have dropped anywhere from $500 for the most basic trim to $5,000 for the highest trim. Though it is important to note that prices of the Mach-E are still higher than they were back in August whenever Ford actually increased the pricing. And just last week, Rivian announced that they would be laying off 6% of their workforce in an effort to preserve cash, and many people are interpreting this as potential evidence to suggest that Rivian may be cutting prices as well. As a result of all of these price cuts and events taking place in 2023, many news outlets and experts are speculating that this could be indicative that an EV price war is coming. But the real question is this actually true? And if so, what does it mean? Well, in order to answer that question, let's first take a look at why EV makers are cutting prices to begin with. And while staying competitive in an increasingly competitive environment is certainly one of the many factors as to why automakers are looking to cut prices on their electric vehicles, a much larger reason is simply government incentives. Y'all may remember that last year there was a lot of discussions around a $7,500 EV tax credit for new cars and a $4,000 used EV tax credit for used ones. But this incentive is very convoluted, and very few cars actually qualify for the incentive because of things like battery manufacturing requirements, vehicle manufacturing requirements, as well as pricing requirements. Used cars must be $25,000 or less, SUVs must be up to $80,000, and sedans can be up to $55,000. And what constitutes as either an SUV or a sedan is determined by the government in this bill. In the United States, there are currently between 50 and 60 electric or plug-in hybrid vehicle models available for purchase, even more if you count individual trim models. And about 20 of these currently qualify for either some or all of the EV tax credit. And whenever we talk about why EV automakers are offering discounts off their vehicles, the EV tax credit is absolutely a huge factor. But there are some other factors that I want to talk about before we go into any more depth about the tax credit specifically. One major factor is affordability, and this is absolutely top of mind for automakers. But I personally believe that this isn't priority number one. The reality is automakers have been raising prices for the last 2 years, and if affordability was the number one concern, not only would they not have raised prices to begin with, and as recently as last year, or in the case of Tesla as recently as a couple of days ago, but they also wouldn't be cutting their cheapest model vehicles in an effort to make more profit margin per vehicle. Automakers like the talking point of affordability, and they like talking about the fact that they're making an effort to make EVs more affordable. But whenever it comes to actually putting their money where their mouth is, the execution falls a bit flat. And while affordability is absolutely a factor here, I ultimately think automakers will more than likely choose to put affordability on the back burner if it means making a larger profit. And they've proven that they will do this time and time again over the last couple of years. Another major factor is competition. For a very long time, the electric vehicle space was pretty much dominated by Tesla and Tesla alone. And over the last couple of years, this space has become increasingly more and more competitive. And price is, of course, going to be a huge factor whenever we're talking about winning over consumers. Not only do price cuts create positive press for the manufacturer, but it also makes buying an EV a much easier sell for the consumer. This is a huge win-win for both the consumer and the automaker. And last, but certainly not least, is that EV tax credit that we were talking about earlier. And this EV tax credit is huge because it takes whatever discount that was applied by Tesla or Ford to their models and it essentially adds an additional $7,500 on top of that. And not only did dropping the price of the EVs compound on top of the already $7,500 in some cases, making a double-digit discount, but in other cases, like the Model Y, it actually made a once unqualified vehicle a qualified one. And while the EV tax credit was absolutely a factor for both Ford and Tesla, it wasn't the only one. Because while discounts were applied to the Model Y, which turned an unqualified vehicle into a qualified one as far as the EV tax credit is concerned, in examples of the Model 3, the Model X, and the Model S, they were all reduced in price, and yet it didn't change their eligibility for the EV tax credit at all. So while the EV tax credit was absolutely a component here, it also wasn't the only factor. At the end of the day, the reasons as to why these automakers are looking to reduce the prices of their electric vehicles comes down to a handful of different reasons, including market share, competition, customer loyalty, affordability, the EV tax credit, and more. There certainly isn't one single reason as to why they made this move. And as far as the impending pricing war goes, well, I'm a bit skeptical. Of course, we can only speculate that Ford and Tesla's price reductions have certainly put other automakers into a tough spot. But my prediction is that we actually won't see any price drops coming from brands that aren't eligible for the EV tax credit. There are a number of brands that are not eligible for the EV tax credit because of manufacturing requirements. A few of these include Jaguar, Hyundai, Mazda, Mercedes, Polestar, Porsche, and more. I don't believe that we'll see price deductions from any of these brands because of the fact that they would simply have to lower their price too much in order to compete with either Tesla or Ford from a price standpoint. I think in the case of these automakers, they are either already cheaper than these brands and thus a discount wouldn't do anything, or they are companies that are just going to bank on the fact that customers will choose them over Ford or Tesla regardless of price. But on the flip side, I do think that we could see some price reductions coming from brands that do qualify for the EV tax credit. So brands like Rivian, Jeep, or even Nissan. But I do think it's important to note that regardless of an EV price war, I do think that electric vehicles in general are going to get cheaper, and they should. Technology historically gets cheaper as it becomes more popular and easier to produce. We can look at dozens and dozens of examples, from TVs to computers and more. And while cars haven't followed this same trend, the technology used to produce electric vehicles specifically should. And as a result, electric vehicles should get cheaper as they become more widely adopted. And I think the reason why we haven't seen this thus far is because of the inflated car market. In some ways, these price decreases, though I'm absolutely happy to see them, leave a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Even with these price cuts, Teslas and the Ford Mach-E are more expensive than they were previously. So yes, they are lowering prices, but not enough to bring prices to where they were originally. And sure, automakers have been adamant that they've had to raise prices as a way to fight unprecedented supply chain issues. But if we look at their record-breaking profit, I feel like that proves otherwise. At the end of the day, it's great news that automakers are lowering prices. But truthfully, I don't see a true EV price war happening anytime soon, at least not as things currently stand with the EV tax credit. But if the EV tax credit opens availability to more vehicles, I could see that changing. But on the flip side, if come March the EV tax credit turns out to be more strict on electric vehicles, thus making less vehicles eligible, I could also see the opposite happening, and I could actually see prices going up again, which is exactly what we saw with the Model Y in the last couple of days. The reason why the price went up between $1,000 and $2,000 is because the regulations and the definition of what an SUV was were changed by the government. Ultimately, only time will tell, but if I was a betting person, I would bet that an EV price war isn't coming anytime soon, at least not with current market conditions. But I will say that if you're somebody who's interested in buying either a Tesla or a Mach-E, now could be a really good time to buy. Like always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next video.